Forms and styles of poetry. Now, when we talk about poetry, we have different kinds of poetry. We have different categories of poetry. But then we have to divide it, or there has to be some divisions to poetry. We're looking at the form in which poetry appears and then the styles or the kinds of poetry. So, in doing that, we're going to look at the different forms that we have. So we're going to start with the forms, and then from there we'll now go to the kinds or the styles of poetry. The first one we are starting with is the epitaph. What do we mean by epitaph? An epitaph is a short, witty poem saying or message on a gravestone in memory of a deceased person. The example you have on your screen is an example of what an epitaph is. Molly, though pleasant in her day, was suddenly seized and went away. How soon she's ripe, how soon she's rotten, laid in her grave and soon forgotten. So when you see poems like this on gravestones, on dead people's gravestones, such poems are called epitaph. The next one we have is haiku. Haiku is a traditional Japanese poem. It's a poem of 17 syllables. It usually has 3 lines. 3 lines of 17 syllables in total. Now, when we talk about syllables, a syllable is simply a unit of pronunciation. So, when you pronounce a word, when you pronounce a word, that unit of the word that you can pronounce in one breath is called a syllable. Okay? So when you look at the example that's the title of the poem is The Old Pond by Matsuo Basho. It says here, an old silent pond. A frog jumps into the pond. Splash, silence, again. Now, if we are to look in depth in this poem, we'll see that the first line has 5 syllables. Let's count it. An old silent pond. How many syllables? 5 syllables. Let's take it one more time. An old silent pond. So you see that the first line has 5 syllables. Now what about the second line? Let's count. A frog jumps into the pond. How many syllables altogether? 7 syllables. Then the last line has another 5 syllables. So I'm going to leave you to do that one. Now you go. Okay? Splash, silence, again. So as you can see, a haiku has 17 syllables of 3 lines. Okay? 3 lines of a poem and then 17 syllables all together. Now, one thing about haiku is that it talks about or it describes nature or scenery. And it does that in a very much concise way. So it usually very short. Okay, it talks about nature or scenery in a very concise form. Moving on, we have the couplet. A couplet poem is a poem that contains 2 lines that are paired together with rhyme and meter. The example we have here says, I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the sweet earth's flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. Now, did you notice something about the end of the lines? If you look carefully, you see that the words at the end of each line, rhyme. For example, in the first stanza we have see and tree. So we have the long sound E, tree, C, and tree. So if we are to look at it very well, if we are to look at the rhyme scheme, we can say that the first line, the first stanza, the rhyme scheme of the first stanza is A, because the end words rhyme. We have C and tree. Then looking at the second stanza, it says pressed and breast. So the word pressed and breast rhyme, so we can name them BB. And then the last stanza says day and pray. Day and pray do rhyme, so we can give them CC. So one thing about couplet is that the end rhymes, it usually has end rhymes. So the words at the end of each stanza rhyme with each other. Okay. Moving on, we have quatrain. From the word quo, from the word quo or quart, you will know that a quatrain is simply a poem that has 4 lines. Okay? Quatrains are 4-line poems that may follow any of the 4 different rhyme schemes. We can have AABB, we can have ABAB, we can have ABBA, we can also have ABCA, as the case may be, depending on the poet's choice of arrangement of the rhyme scheme. Now, it also says that when quatrains begin to make up a long poem, they are then called stanzas. So what this means is that a long poem can have stanzas that are quatrains. Each of the stanzas of a poem can be quatrains. Okay? Now, an example we have here says, the rushing ocean waves beat harshly on the sand. They roar and crash and foam as they break upon the land. Now you tell me, what is the rhyme scheme of this quatrain? I'll leave you to find out on your own. Then we have the sonnet. A sonnet is a highly structured 14-line poem that explores deeply felt issues. For example, the fleeting nature of love. Sonnet is usually used to express love. If we look at all the Shakespearean sonnets, most of them express love, even beauty. And also, they are used to express the aching questions or explore the aching questions of mortality. Most of the metaphysical poems are sonnets. Metaphysical poetry is something we are going to discuss later. So a traditional sonnet has 14 lines, each of which is written in iambic pentameter. We have discussed that before, so you go watch that video. The example we have here is an example of a sonnet. That's a Shakespearean sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day by William Shakespeare? So if we look at this sonnet, we'll see that the rhyme scheme, it has a rhyme scheme. A minute. Okay, if you look at this sonnet, you can see that it has a particular rhyme scheme. Now let's look at the first line. We have day on the first line. Second line says temperate. The third line says May. The fourth line, we have date. What do you think could be the rhyme scheme here? We have A, B, A, B. Here we also have another. We have shines, dims, declines, untrimmed. So we now have CD, CD. Then we also have fade, oust, shade, grossed. This will give us EF, EF, and then we have GG. So look for the video where I discuss the rhyme scheme of the sonnets. We have the Petrarchan sonnet, we have the Shakespearean sonnet. There are 2 types of sonnet, the Petrarchan sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet. So another form of poetry that we are going to discuss is what we call the sestina, or we also call it the sestet. This is a complex form of poetry which contains 6 stanzas of 6 lines each and a final 3-line envoy. The same six end words are repeated throughout the poem, often in a specific pattern. If you look at the lines of this poem, you'll see that some words are repeated. For example, look at, we have the first line, we have bits. In the first stanza, we have bits, we have nice, we have spice, blue, dried. Now, if you go to the second stanza, you'll see that some of these words are also repeated. Now, this is how sestina works. Okay? Now, let's look at the one we call villanelle. A villanelle is also another type or another form of poetry. It is a highly structured poem with 19 lines. We have 19 lines and a specific rhyme scheme. Okay? Villanelles often revolve around obsessive themes and use repetition to create a haunting effect. Some villanelles talk about death. For example, in the poem that you see on your screen, this one talks about death. The title of the poem is "Do Not Leave My Carcass in the City" by Bantu West. So I'll leave you to read the poem, and then you'll also notice that the poem has 19 lines. And if you also check very well, you'll see that there is a rhyme scheme to each stanza. So what I want you to do for me is this. Identify the rhyme scheme of each of the stanzas. I'll do the first one for you. So the first stanza says, "Do not leave my carcass in the city. Bury me whole by my grandfather's side. Let me repose far from the vanity." So the rhyme scheme is A, B, C. Okay, A, B, A, not A, B, C. A, B, A. It's because we have city rhyming with vanity. All right. So if you also continue that way, you also see that the rhyme scheme or the rhyme pattern is almost similar. In the second stanza, you have charity, plight, city. So you have the first line of the second stanza rhyming with the third line of the second stanza. Okay? So this is the rest of the poem. You go through it and then look at the rhyme scheme. Now, we have talked about the forms of poetry. Now, there are so many forms of poetry, okay? If we are to discuss the forms of poetry, we cannot exhaust them in one session. So, as we progress, we'll be discussing the various forms of poetry. Now, we are going to look at the kinds or the styles of poetry. Some poems can also be written in narrative form. Now, when we talk about narrative simply means telling a story. When you tell someone to narrate something to you, what does that mean? You are telling the person to tell you a story about an event, about a situation, or anything. So, narrative poems, just as the name suggests, these are poems that tell stories. Now, there are different types of poems that do this. Examples of such poems are the ones we call the epic and ballad. Now, what do we mean by epic? An epic poem is simply a long narrative poem that is usually about heroic deeds and events that are significant to the culture of the poet. Now, what this means is that for a poet to write an epic, the poet is going to write an epic that is born out of the cultural out of his or her cultural context. So it could be an event that happened in his culture. So such events can be penned down by a poet and then turned into a poem to tell the story. Now, this is another way that stories about legends are handed down from one generation to another. If you follow the story of Odyssey or Odysseus, written by Homer, you will notice that Odysseus is also is a story. It's a story about a hero. Okay? So the poem Odyssey features the heroic deeds of Odysseus. Another example is Paradise Lost by John Milton. So there are different types of epic poems. In fact, the legend Beowulf has its own epic. The story of Beowulf has a poem, and that poem is considered to be an epic because it tells the story of the legend Beowulf. So there are different types of epic poems. Moving on, we have ballad. A ballad is a poem with a musical quality that is often used to tell a tragic story. It could be a love story, it could be an adventure. It uses simple language and a lot of repetition. Why is it so? Because most times ballads are spontaneous. What this means is that ballads are composed on the spot. Sometimes ballads are composed on the spot. It usually has regular rhythm and rhyme scheme, which makes it easy to memorize. Then we have some poems that are called lyric poems. These lyric poems are poems that express deep emotions and feelings of the poet. Sonnet is an example of a lyric. Lyric poems are usually short, musical, subjective in nature. By subjective, we mean it is based on the poet's emotions, based on the poet's perspective, based on what the poet thinks or how the poet sees or perceives things. So there are several types of lyric poetry. We have the sonnet, which we have already discussed. We have haiku, we have villanelle, we have sestina. Now, the ones that we have already discussed are also types of lyric poem. Now, you can see that there are some similarities. So the form in which they appear is different, but their style or their style and their kind may be the same. So a poem can be a sonnet, but then it's a lyric poem. A poem can be a haiku, but then it's also a lyric poem. A poem can be a villanelle, but is a lyric poem. Why? Because such poem expresses intense emotions and feelings of the poet. So the form in which they appear differ, but the style may be the same. Still on lyric poem, we have elegy. An elegy is a mournful and reflective poem that laments the loss of someone or something. Elegies are often written in response to death or other forms of loss. Most times when elegies are written, they are usually delivered or rendered at the graveside of the deceased. Please take note, elegy is different from epitaph. Remember, epitaph is usually engraved on the gravestone of the deceased. But in the case of elegy, it is usually rendered at the graveside when the person is being buried. Okay, so elegy is different from epitaph. Elegy is also different from ballad. Ballad talks about a tragic event. It could be a tragic love story, it could be a tragic adventure, and all that. But in the case of elegy, elegy simply mourns the death of a loved one. We have another one called ghazal. This is a form of poetry prominent in Persian and Arabic traditions. Ghazals consist of rhyming couplets and they explore themes of love, loss, and metaphysical questions. When we talk about metaphysical questions, we are actually looking at some poems that talk about abstract ideas. The poems that see life or see nature from abstract things. Now that is going to be another topic for another day. So stay tuned and watch. Then we have the one that is called ode. Please, there is this trend among students. Some students call it ode. It is not ode, it is ode. Okay, O-D-E, ode. An ode is a lyrical poem that pays tribute to a particular person, object, or idea. It often has a formal structure and a serious or elevated tone. What this simply means is that an ode glorifies, is a poem that is written to glorify or to praise an object. For example, we have the poem called Ode to the Nightingale. This is a poem written to pay tribute to a bird called the nightingale. Okay, so when we say ode, an ode is written to give tribute, to pay respect to an object or a thing, or a person rather. Sometimes one could write a poem in honor of maybe a parent, in honor of a loved one. Such poems are ode. When you write poems to pay respect to someone that you love, someone that you admire, someone that you uphold or you hold in high regard or high esteem, such a poem is an ode. Then we have the one that we call dramatic poetry. It is called dramatic poetry because it is meant to be spoken or acted out. How you mean? Dramatic poetry is meant to not just to be read. So in this case, we have a character acting out the lines of a poem. So dramatic poetry can come in form of dramatic monologue or what we call closet drama. In the case of dramatic monologue, we have a character acting out the lines of a poem, telling a story from the perspective of a character. Now, dramatic monologue may be different from epic. It's actually different from epic or ballad or narrative poem, as the case may be. Why? Because in the case of dramatic poetry, you are telling a story by acting out that character. So you are telling the story from the perspective of the character. So you are not a third person narrating the story of another person. You are acting out a particular character. So I could say that I could act out the story of, I could read a poem, I act out the story of Beowulf, okay, and I'm acting the character of Beowulf. So I'm reading my poem, I'm reading my lines, I am Beowulf, I'm assuming the role or the character of Beowulf, and I'm reading my lines, I'm delivering my lines. So in this case, it's called dramatic monologue. So you are rendering your lines. It's as if you are talking to the audience or whoever cares to listen. You are expressing your thoughts aloud to whoever cares to listen. So I could be Beowulf, expressing my thoughts aloud to the audience, or maybe to another character on stage with me. So that is how we have for the styles and forms of poetry. Now let's look at some questions from the exam guide on the topic. Okay, let's look at this question. It says, the rhyme scheme in the first stanza is what? So we are going to read the poem. It says, I'm going soldiering, mad the reading runs, with drumming and with trumpeting, and glory of the guns. What is the rhyme scheme in the first stanza? Option A says AABB. Option B says ABAB. Option C, ABAA. Option D, AABC. So let's do it together. In the first stanza, the first line ends with soldiering. The second line ends with runs. The third line ends with trumpeting. And the fourth line ends with guns. So we can say that the rhyme scheme is ABAB. So the answer is B. Okay, well, because our topic is on poetry, we can read this poem. It says, proud mothers of the coming age, 'tis good to find you now engaged, your minds and the time your lives to raise above the level of bygone days. 'Tis good to see you play your part with spirit and undaunted heart. It gives young Africa's throbbing soul a glimpse of a bright and glorious goal. God bless you, mothers of our race. God cause you to shine on you his face, and give you strength and all you crave, to bring forth sons and daughters brave. What is the theme of the poem? A says the love of mother. B, invoking the spirit of womanhood. C, admiration for women's hard work. D, the suffering of women. The answer to this question is C, admiration for women's hard work. Okay, now let's look at this one. Here lies our sovereign Lord the King, whose word no man relies on, who never said a foolish thing and never did a wise one. Okay, this is an example of an epigram. Okay, we have not discussed epigram, but this is an example of an epigram. An epigram is also a short, witty poem. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Question 10 says, tell me not, sweet, I'm unkind, that from the nunnery of thy chest breast and quiet mind to war and arms I fly. True, a new mistress now I chase, the first foe in the field, and with a stronger faith embrace, a sword, a horse, a shield. Yet this inconsistency is such as you too shall adore. I could not love thee, dear, so much. Loved I not honor more. The rhyme pattern of the poem is, what is the rhyme pattern? So we're going to look at the first stanza again. It says, unkind, nunnery, unkind, breast, mind, fly. So we're going to see, we have chase, field, embrace, shield, search, adore, much. So it's going to be A, B, A, B.